we thought that it would be better to start a kind of exchange and to discuss about your own specificities. And I hope I can hear from you about your specific needs. What is the EU-UNIDO partnerships? I thought it's better to understand what is the EU for UNIDO. What do they bring to us?
To address the partner countries' needs and to help them in the recovery, the European launched its Global Response Initiative, which came under the name of Team Europe. So what is Team Europe? Firstly, it is an instrument of an overall of 20 billion euro, indeed to support short and long-term needs of partner countries. Money is coming from mainly the European Commission, but also there are loans coming from the European Investment Bank, for example.
There are three priorities of Team Europe. Emergency response to the immediate health crisis. The second one is to strengthen health, water, and sanitation systems. And the last one is to address socio-economic consequences of this pandemic in the long run.
The EU will promote a coordinated and multilateral response, partnering with G20, the United Nations, of course, international financial institutions, and G7 as well. Here you can see where the money is coming from.
To further support global epidemic preparedness, the European Commission also launched an international pledging program. So moving on to the second section, which is thematic and geographical breakdown.
Starting from the thematic, you can see that here the three priorities I told you earlier about are reflected in this cake graph.
And in terms of geographical breakdown, as we can see from this pie chart, most funding goes to neighborhood partner countries, Africa, Western Balkans, and Turkey, and also ACP region.
As Africa is a priority for UNIDO, it is also for the European Union, and this.
So many times, 2020 has been called a pivotal year for EU-Africa relations. So as a reminder, Africa and the EU cooperate through different frameworks, two of which are going to be renewed this year. So the first one is the joint Africa-EU strategy, and which is deemed to be discussed at the EU-AU summit in October this year. And it is within this context and as part of the ongoing dialogue with African leaders that the EU launched a joint communication to the European Parliament and the Council on the new Africa-EU strategy. So the communication focuses on 5 key partnerships and suggests 10 points of action as a basis for future cooperation.
One of the most important legally binding agreements between the European Union and African countries is the Cotonou Agreement.
Which is actually the second reason why 2020 is a pivotal year, because a new partnership agreement between the EU and the Organization of ACP States, which is a new name for ACP countries, is indeed supposed to be adopted. Originally, it was scheduled to expire in February 2020, but the OACPS and EU have agreed to extend it until the new post-Cotonou agreement is concluded and signed, which is expected to be in 2021. So while the main innovation on the EU side is the idea to develop 3 different partnerships according to the region, it is the negotiation of the African Regional Partnership, the factor that is making negotiations last longer than expected.
Then I will move to the G5 Sahel. So what is important to know is that the European Union is the largest partner and donor in the Sahel region, and its presence is based on the EU strategy for security and development in the region. And what is important regarding 2020 is that on 28th of April, EU and G5 Sahel leaders adopted a joint declaration covering 4 main areas.
So to talk about the current coronavirus crisis and its impact on Africa-EU relations, because the EU has now the opportunity to prove that it really cares about the so-called sister continent. However, African countries had a difficult start of the year, and everything is pointing towards a much longer period of crisis for the continent. Others see this in a more positive light and see that as a momentum for a green transition and an increased intra-continental trade.
Probably a lot of you already know the multi-annual financial framework, the MFF. This is the way, this is the budget. The budget of the European Union has always been called the MFF. Now, the total EU budget for the next 7 years is 1,850 billion euro. This is the budget that's going to be used for all programs, policies, projects, etc. within the EU, so internal and the external as well. The new thing with the budget this time is that they have added something called the Next Generation EU. Now, the Next Generation EU is an emergency instrument and it's meant to respond to the COVID-19. The part that we as UNIDO are going to be looking at especially is the blue part, the NDK or NDCI. This one is new compared to everything that existed before. Most of it is going to be a geographic component, and this means that the funds are going to be allocated to a specific region. And this is different compared to last time. Obviously, here we need to add the Next Generation EU that I was talking about. 10.5 billion are going to join the NDCI, and they're going to be used to top up the External Action Guarantee.
Patrick, bonjour.
Bonjour, Alessandro. How are you? Nice to see you.
Very good. Thank you. Good morning from Brasilia.
Good morning, Brasilia.
Thank you for the presentation. Well, it was really interesting. Lot of information.
Good morning, Patrick. Thank you so much for this initiative. Let me share screen for a while and then we'll switch off because sometimes I have interruption of the internet and little issues. And thank you for this initiative. I really appreciate your efforts and to stay in touch with the field offices and to understand what we are doing in the field and how your office and your team can help us. And as you know, we have relatively good portfolio with the EU in Ghana. This is particularly on the trade issues on West Africa component on infrastructure and trade competitiveness. So I myself have close coordination and contact with the EU ambassador. She's very dedicated and she's really keen supporting the EPA process in Africa, and we regularly invite her even for the webinar during the COVID session. So she's really keen and addressing SME issues on how to tackle the COVID issues and to survive during these issues. And
yeah, I had raised my hand. I wrote a question actually, but just to simplify, I wanted to know to what extent could we, for instance, flag our contribution to the country response plan to COVID-19, because there is the country response plan, and in many countries, like and Mozambique is not an exception. UNIDO is part of the response plan, particularly in the in tackling the economic or socio-economic impacts of COVID related to business continuity for the SME sector, job retention, repurposing of production lines, etc.
Good morning, Patrick and colleagues.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for inviting us to this meeting. I'm very excited in terms of our potential collaboration with the EU. As you are aware, we have been trying to work closely together with the EU to fund some of the projects which we have developed under the Zimbabwe Country Program for Inclusive and Sustainable Industrial Development. And we have also engaged, with the Zimbabwean ambassador in Brussels, and also government officials here in Zimbabwe, and the EU ambassador.
Good afternoon, Patrick.
Good afternoon.
Many thanks for the presentation with the rest of the colleagues. My name is Lynette from the Kenya Field Office. Just to confirm that here on the ground, we see a very close collaboration between the EU delegation and the resident coordinator within the framework of the One UN reform, and also quite a strong push for funding joint programs in this context.
First, I really need to say thank you so much to you and the team for having organized this. It's extremely interesting, and it helps us to have a look a bit beyond our kind of traditional comfort zone of where we work with the EU, which of course is a lot in quality infrastructures, a lot in West Africa and so on. But I think is very eye-opening to see what the EU is interested beyond what we already kind of work with. And of course, I've seen with a lot of interest all the recent or not so recent attention that that goes to the neighborhood kind of area and and cooperation.
Points. Yeah. So let me thank you again and wish you a nice day. I take one more picture. And the next sessions are in September and in October on industry, digital age, and Green Deal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patrick. See you in October. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.